Of course, he's going to use whatever he can do professionally to go see C.J. Stroud play a football game. Of course, he's going to get a press pass. So when I heard Albert's like, I'm on my way to Gillette to go watch C.J. Stroud's premiere, I'm like, of course he is. And he's joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Albert? How you doing?
It was too easy for me. It was right down the street. I'm not saying I would have traveled for it, but it might have been poor form if I hadn't shown up with it right down the street.
You would have paid Sports Illustrated to do this last night. It's one of those moments, right, for you, Albert?
No
right?
comment.
It's one of those moments for you. And
it was. It was a little rough. It was a little rough. Wasn't. I don't think it's what we're going to see out of C.J. Stroud long term, but
of course,
it's a good example of. It's a good example of what these preseason games have become, and sort of the risk that you take. I mean, there's a reason why. Bill Belichick didn't put Mac Jones out there, and I think part of it is they only had, I believe, one line, and whether that guy's a starter is debatable. And it was the same with C.J. Stroud. Both the starting tackles weren't there. Their veteran starting guard wasn't there. They had two starters that were in the lineup on the offensive line, and one of them's a rookie, and Juice Scruggs out of Penn State. So I think, you sort of, expect some of this, and I don't think it's a mistake that DeMeco Ryans got him out of there pretty quickly. But
yeah, and I'm with you, Albert.
Not a lot to chew on there.
Of course, I'm with you. And plus, he at least learned to find his Michigan man first in Nico Collins, so he's got that for him. But in all seriousness, though, he can't put on a Texans helmet and uniform and play a game for the Texans for the first time at Baltimore in week 1. Like, going against Belichick without starting tackles and without it is kind of like throwing him in a very deep end of the pool and learning how to swim. And he handled it. I think he handled it very well after the game too. I mean, you got to do it. This is when you're drafting second overall quarterback, this is what you got to do. End of story. And then they won the game, which has got to feel good about the entire unit getting on a plane to fly back home. So I get you totally. That's the way it works.
Yeah, and I mean it's going to be interesting to see the way it goes with all the rookie quarterbacks, because I do know, this really goes back to 2008 when Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco had all the success that they had as rookies, where even like. Not even about like what's best for those guys, I don't know. Like I was having an interesting conversation with Matt LaFleur about sitting Jordan Love, and he said to me, I said, so you feel good about the decision to sit him for 3 years then? And his answer to me was, I think every quarterback could use this. He's like, because it's so hard out there for rookies to succeed, and a lot of these guys get thrown in situations where they're on bad teams. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case with the three guys this year, but they lose confidence. If they
you want to put him on hold there?
It's hard to get that confidence back.
Are you there? Are you Albert? You're cutting in and out. I don't know if you're in that part of Massachusetts. That's a problem. I don't know.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So yeah. So
okay.
You just mentioned how. You spoke to Matt LaFleur about, sitting Jordan Love, and that was a no-brainer, right? I mean, and Aaron Rodgers winning 2 MVPs while you're sitting your quarterback and waiting is exactly the type of stuff that you'd like to do. And the question is what about Jordan Love now? And you're hearing the Bengals in their practices just loving Jordan Love and seeing what they saw out of him and having no problem praising him. What do you expect out of this weekend with Jordan Love, Albert?
Well, when I asked Matt about it, I said to him, I'm like, so you want him to see more. And that was the big thing, was like, because he hasn't been in games, like there's still experiences that he has to go through. And so I thought logically, when I was talking to Matt about it, logically, okay, like then wouldn't it make sense to kind of try to check as many of those boxes as you can in the preseason games? And his answer to me was, yes, but we have to balance that against who else we're putting out there, which starters are going to be out there. So you want to be able to protect them. And there's the injury risk. And then, he said the other part of it was, like, let's see how the joint practices go. And I think that that's sort of the piece of preseason that a lot of the more casual fans might miss is, like, a big reason why you're seeing fewer and fewer starters in the games is because you're seeing more and more joint practices. And a lot of coaches feel like we can get the work we would get in the preseason games in joint practices. And if we can get good work there in a controlled environment where the quarterbacks aren't getting hit, where, we can, generate the situations we want to see, well, then the preseason games become even less necessary. And so, I know going into this, Matt I know his intention was to kind of go on feel here. And, if he felt like they got enough good work in the joint practices with the Bengals, maybe they would scale back what they would do with him in the game. So I think that's a decision he was planning on taking right up to today, and trying to figure out whether or not, it was really necessary to get a ton of work for Jordan out there or just get his feet wet a little bit.
So what's the general sense about him? I mean, you want to talk about a quarterback of the moment. It certainly is him. What's the general sense that you're hearing about Jordan Love?
It's a big we'll see. I think everybody's aware of where the bar is in Green Bay, and when you have 30 years of quarterback stability with 2 Hall of Famers, I think it's obvious what's going to be expected by the general public there, and what it's going to be like living, in that fishbowl, if you're Jordan Love. And, I think that's why, one of the things that both he and LaFleur said to me that was so interesting was, like, what Aaron Rodgers' text to Jordan was right before camp, was be yourself. And, the way Jordan took that was, I got to go run my own race. And I got to go play the way I know I can play. I got to, just go out there and run the offense and do what's being asked of me and not try to, live up to this impossible standard that's been set over the last 30 years. And, yeah, you want to get there, but, the key is being able to do what he's been groomed to do, what he's been taught to do, what he's, sat the last 3 years to do. And so I'd expect, like, that, at least early on, Matt LaFleur is going to lean on his defense and his run game, and that's still a talented team. And, I think Jordan Love's going to be the bus driver early on. And I think that's the right way to do it, and I think that's what the expectation should be, for him not to carry the team. And people forget, like, through Aaron Rodgers' first year and a half starting, the Packers were 10-14, and then they really took off. So I would say, there's a really good team around Jordan Love there, and, he's lucky in that way. And early on, at least, the idea is that he's going to, be the bus driver of sorts and just try to keep the train on the tracks. And then the hope is that he grows into being more than that. And
then it's Packers at Bengals tonight on NFL Network at 7 Eastern time. Are we going to see Burrow on the sideline standing or not at all? Seeing what is a boot, or they just because that we'll get the idea of if it's been several weeks more from now, or just it's been only a couple weeks since the several weeks, as Zach Taylor went very cryptic on an update from Burrow. Are we going to just visually see Joe tonight, do you think? What's your 2 cents on that?
I'm not sure about that. I know that they've kept him off his feet some. They kept him off his feet a lot early, and then it was, I want to say it was 4 or 5 days he was back on his feet again. Mm-hmm. So where they tried to keep him a little bit more, hey, let's just be careful with this, let's not tweak it. It was pretty quick that they were able to get him back up on his feet. He wasn't out of practice a ton. I know he'd like to be, but I know he was spending that time inside rehabbing. And he did that in order to not miss any meetings or any of the other team stuff that would go on when they weren't out on the practice field. So he could sort of, do his work when the team was doing its work. My sense of it is there wasn't a huge level of concern that he was going to miss week 1. Now, obviously, Jamar Chase's comments did get my attention like everybody else. But, I think the plan has been to be careful with him. And look, he's typically a fast healer, but this is a different thing than the ACL or the appendicitis. And generally, I know their feeling was with most other players, the sort of injury he suffered, this is a 4 to 6 week injury, which, puts him close to the opener from when he heard it. But if he is, on his normal track where he does heal fast, there is a pretty good chance that will put him on track to start week 1. So, again, it's sort of like this tricky thing, but I know the Bengals want to err on the side of caution, and I know the other thing about it is he's proven he hasn't had a full offseason as a pro, which is mind blowing when you think about how advanced he is as a player. And while that sucks, it also gives you something to lean on if you're the Bengals, where you can, actually have evidence and say he doesn't really need the risking it until it's absolutely necessary to have him out there on the practice field.
Albert Breer, Sports Illustrated here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's talk about the final game of the preseason weekend, something you can also see on NFL Network at 4 Eastern Time. San Francisco at Las Vegas. How do you think we will see the quarterback situation for the 49ers play out this weekend, Albert?
I think Brock won't play. That'd be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they're trying to be careful and ramping him back up, and they've been very deliberate about putting him in, I would say, intense situations. They were taking him up step by step through the process when it comes to velocity and distance of throw and all of that. And my understanding is the plan was potentially to take the reins off fully this coming week. So the reins are still on to some degree. So that's why I think he won't play on Sunday. And then after that, I think the reins start to come off, and you start to see more fully what they're planning to do with him. And they've got great confidence in him. I would say there's and I'm doing a big story on this on Monday, but just being there the other day and talking to John and talking to Kyle about what they think of him. Kyle actually said to me, for the 7 full games that he played in last year, he played about as well as a quarterback could play for what we were asking him to do. And, Kyle was very clear. He's our starter. So they're planning on, they're getting him ready for week 1. They're getting him ready to be starter. At the same time, you and I both know that, Kyle's as open-minded as anybody when it comes to playing guys that might be in the lineup right now or considering other options. He doesn't tie himself to one thing. So certainly I think, again, as we've talked about the whole offseason, there's that little narrow path there where, maybe Sam Darnold or Trey Lance could create a situation for themselves where it's if Brock gets hurt for 2 or 3 weeks, Kyle will want to see them, and maybe the same scenario plays out that played out last year. I wouldn't completely rule that out, but they're really happy with Brock. Wow, I think they said, they've said to me this has been Trey's best camp, and obviously Sam, you can see the talent that made him the 3rd overall pick in the first place.
So, oh my gosh, so Brock, yes, and then who, right? I mean,
yeah. And I think it's wide open. I mean, that's my interpretation of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't think Trey's necessarily the number 2, and obviously if he's not the number 2, that opens up other questions as well.
Sure does. Like what? Go for it.
If somebody's willing to give him a draft pick, do you do it? And do the Niners, who really like Trey as a person, do they want to afford him the opportunity to get a fresh start somewhere else with the acknowledgement? With what they think of Brock Purdy, that the opportunity might not be there for him. This is, as it is for all quarterbacks, year 3 is a big one, because that's when the decision gets made on your 5th-year option. You become eligible for an extension afterwards and all of that. Big decisions are made on quarterbacks after year 3. If, you're pretty resolute that Trey Lance isn't going to get the opportunity there, do you see if somebody's willing to flip a draft pick for him? And it might be tough to get a draft pick for him. And that's not that he can't play, but the contract makes it a little difficult to trade him just because the next 2 years are guaranteed. And while it's not big money, he was the 3rd overall pick in the draft, so it's not nothing either, And so, that's something like that. I think it's one of those, for the Niners, we'll cross that road when we get to a type of situations. But if Sam beats him out to be the backup, then, it's certainly something they would consider.
Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. I can't wait to see this play out. There's no doubt. Plus, also, you could trade Trey Lance if you can bring in Phillip Rivers as your 3rd stringer, right, Albert? Like, what's up with
they
that?
got him on speed dial now, I guess, right?
Yeah, just so give me the origins of this. When did they first reach out to Philip that you know? And for damn sure, if they'd gotten out of Philadelphia alive, he would have been signed for the Super Bowl. I believe that would have happened 1,000,000%, Albert.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw what Jimmy said to our mutual friend Mike Silver. Did you see that?
Go for it.
So Jimmy said to Mike that he 100% would have been ready for the Super Bowl. So I guess then Philip probably would have been backing up Jimmy in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating situation. I mean, it was funny because I was with one of my buddies last night. We were talking about like, has there ever been a situation quite like this? And the closest thing I could come up with was Weddle, right? Like, where a veteran just joins a team.
Oh yeah.
I think Weddle would be the closest thing. And Weddle wasn't just a Super. I mean, Weddle was the whole playoffs, you know. So there was at least some build up to that. And I mean, Philip obviously, as you know, is as football smart as they come. But the idea that a guy would just join a team like a couple of weeks before the Super Bowl is really wild to think about.
Now, how could Jimmy have been ready for the Super Bowl if he wasn't even ready for his own press conference in Las Vegas due to the foot? Albert,
well,
and I know surgery happened, but
that,
come on. I mean, really? He would have been ready for playing the Super Bowl.
So that was the whole idea, though, Rich. Like, that was the thing. Like, so when they made the decision not to do the surgery in December, my understanding of it was, like, we want to keep the most doors open, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there were really two reasons why they put off. They said, we're not doing the surgery now. And there was a chance he wasn't going to need the surgery at all, but they all knew it was a possibility.
Right.
The first thing was to leave open that possibility that he could come back and potentially play in a conference title game or a Super Bowl. So that was part of it. And then the second piece of it was Jimmy himself wanted to leave open the possibility that if he didn't need the surgery, that he could go to a new team and then he'd have a full off-season program with that new team.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously they kept that hope alive all the way up until he signed with the Raiders. Then he goes and does the physical, and they're like, no. Like, we want you to have the surgery now.
Right.
Let's not mess around with this. But that was the idea. The idea was, all right, I want to leave open the possibility for myself that I'm going to go to a new team and I'm not going to need the surgery, and then I'm going to get a chance to assimilate over April and May and June and get all the work I need in.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, like, obviously the Raiders made the decision and the Raiders doctors made the decision that wasn't the right way to go. And so Jimmy was limited to kind of the mental work. And he did a lot of stuff with Devontae Adams and everything else to get himself up to speed mentally. But that, was the decision the Raiders made, that he was better off having the surgery than getting the physical work in the spring.
Okay, in the few minutes I have left with you here, let's talk about the running backs. Jacobs obviously won't be playing in this weekend. He's not even signing his tender. And Dalvin Cook is putting out some videos of him looking really spry. And Zeke is still sitting at home. And Kareem Hunt left Indianapolis, now left two places where he kicked tires and didn't sign a contract. And Leonard Fournette sitting out there. When is rubber going to meet the road? I mean, the NFL's coming, and I know these guys don't want to be in training camp. They might be waiting to see injuries. What do you got for me on this front?
I was going to say, Rich, it seems like some people some of the running backs and the edge rushers out there are executing the old Walter Jones plan. Do you remember that?
Yes, I hear you.
Where the Seahawks would franchise him every year, and then he would
exactly.
Then he would say, "Okay, I'm not signing that until training camp's over."
Right, exactly. By the way, and even mentioned Jonathan Taylor, who leaves the team to rehab on his own. Like, what's that about?
Yeah,
Albert, come on.
Yeah, I think that shows you how ugly that situation's gotten, and obviously, I think what exacerbated that situation is obviously what happened right there at the franchise tag deadline. With all of the tagged guys, with Jacobs and Barkley and well, not so much Pollard, but Pollard was one of the guys who was tagged. I think this is going to play out a little like the edge rusher situation, where I believe Yannick Ngakoue was the first one to sign, and then after Ngakoue signs, you start to see things springing loose a little bit with guys like Justin Houston, and you see Clowney going and doing visits now. I think it's going to take one guy to jump, and I think part of the problem is, these guys are used to making more money than they're being offered now, so they want to make sure they don't shortchange themselves. And, guys like Cook and Zeke are used to making big money, like 8 figures a year. And a lot of times it's tough for veteran players to reckon with the idea of making a fraction of that. And so they want to keep the idea alive. Well, maybe somebody has an injury somewhere, something happens. And I think, as the weeks pass, it winds up becoming a game of musical chairs. And I think that's what's playing out here is once one of them signs, you'll start to see those dominoes fall. But it takes one for that to happen. And obviously that hasn't happened yet.
Okay. Zach Martin, Chris Jones, are they just going to have to eat it? Because it certainly seems like management's telling them to right now.
I think those are two separate situations, but I think in both cases it's wild how much money those guys are giving up to make their point. I'm blown away, and I guess you can respect the principle. I think they're both over $1 million in fines now, which is crazy. I think Zach Martin, that eventually gets done with some sort of adjustment to his deal. Chris Jones is a little bit more difficult because it's a new deal, and the Chris Jones situation, there's a very specific problem here. There's an Aaron Donald problem, okay? And on one end, you have what Aaron Donald got when he was leveraging retirement against the Rams, which was a complete outlier of a contract, right? Way above what any defensive tackle had gotten. And then you have like where the rest of the market is. And you see what Jeffrey Simmons got from the Titans and what Quinn and Williams got from the Jets. And so basically where the divide there is, you got the Chiefs willing to pay him at that market rate. Like, we'll give you a bump over what Quinn and Williams and Jeff Simmons got, right? And he's like, no, I'm like Aaron Donald. I'm over here. And because he's already gotten a second contract, he's got the financial wherewithal to say, I'm willing to sit out to make you do it. And because of that, that's become a little bit of a staring contest. So a little bit like, a lot of the listeners won't remember this, but almost 10 years ago now, like the Calvin Johnson contract was a complete outlier at receiver, and it wound up making negotiations for players like Des Bryant and Demaryius Thomas really, really difficult. I think we're in the same sort of situation with Chris Jones right now. And, I don't know what's going to give, but it's hard to doubt the resolve of a man who's willing to walk away from 7 figures to make his point.
Albert, greatly appreciate the time. Greatly drive safe, and we'll chat again soon. Thanks, brother.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it.
Must follow out Albert Breer on Twitter. Go check him out right there. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.